Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Buy Round interview show. Today we are joined by one of the key architects of Penrith's 4 in a row premierships, none other than Penrith Panthers CEO, Matt Cameron.
Hello, James. Thanks for having me.
Matt, absolute pleasure. What you and that football club have managed to achieve is, the word unbelievable gets bandied around in sport when someone comes up with a miraculous try save or a try, or maybe goes back to back once. But what this Penrith Panthers have achieved, I think it far surpasses that phrase of unbelievable, because if Hollywood directors came up with that script from when you first started, you'd say, nah, come on, it's a bit far-fetched.
No, they're a good batch. There are some great young men in that group, and we've been blessed at the moment. We're in a really good spot, I suppose, and looking forward to more of it. So,
yeah. How have the past 10 days, 2 weeks been? We're recording this. What is it? Yeah, about 10 days after the. 10 days.
No, it was good. And
the grand final.
Back to the club after the game. The boys, obviously, I think it's a bit of a tradition now. Like once the crowd leaves the venue, they tend to go back out onto the field, like a bit like the cricket team when you see them out on the pitch in the middle of the year. So they went out and they spent a bit of time on the field, back on the bus, back to Panthers. Obviously, we had a function at the club that finished about 5 a.m. I think they went on a harbour cruise on the Monday evening, and then we had our season dinner on the Tuesday night. So that was a good night. Plenty of awards handed out on that night, and then they had the signing session, the SE product signing session on the Wednesday. I think they might have enjoyed each other's company again on the Wednesday night, and I think the coaches had dinner and drinks on the Thursday night, and then by that stage, most of them, obviously the boys involved in the Pac Champs, they're in camp, and I think at that stage everyone probably tapped out a little bit. So
4 in a row, 4 nights in a row. Not a bad way to celebrate. In terms of the feeling amongst the individuals and amongst the group, is it different year on year? I imagine when you had that first one in 2021, that was like pure joy. It's new. But how have the feelings changed over the years when it comes to lifting that trophy and everything that happens in the aftermath?
Yeah. And you're right, each one of the 4 has been a little bit different. Obviously, 21, they were in camp on the Sunshine Coast. So there was a restricted number of, families that were up there. I think some number was like 132, like playing group, family and kids. 2022 was, the boys were really excited because they'd actually got the opportunity to experience like the semi-final series and the grand final in front of their friends and family, which they hadn't been able to do the year before. And it was they were in control of the game for most of the game. So it was probably, I don't know, it's, probably looking at the clock halfway through the second half, it's probably a very surreal experience for some of them. Obviously, the 23 game against the Broncos was probably the polar opposite. It was, 15 minutes to go. Shoe was on the other foot. And then I think the game 10 days ago was, I know, there's been various people from other codes criticising, how exciting it was, but I think from a purist point of view, like the ball in play, the cycling from one end to the other, just the constant level that it was played at for the 80 minutes. I think it was probably a sense of relief at the end of it. So every one of them has been a little bit different. So
that last game against Melbourne Storm, people that criticise it, they don't understand our game.
No,
because
you're right.
if Penrith or Melbourne play anybody else and match that intensity against anybody else, we're talking cricket scores.
Yep.
We're talking absolute cricket scores. I think that what I admired in the opening exchanges, the level of desperation from both teams defensively. I was thinking they're going to crack. Oh no, they'll crack at the back end of the half. And obviously Liam Martin scored that try just before half time, and then the intensity of the open exchanges in the second half was like, oh, this game's going to open up now. Yeah. But it just didn't.
I felt the same way. I thought the last 20 minutes could just be frantic. It was, but it wasn't on the scoreboard. It was. But you're right. It's from a purist point of view. Yeah, the ball in play, the defensive efforts, and then combined with the lack of missed tackles, errors, all those sorts of things. was refereed well. Actually didn't interject himself in the game too much. I don't think so. But yeah, it was a good game of footy. Good watch,
It was.
so.
I thought it was the two best teams, and it's hard to criticize any player or any team because I think both teams played really well.
Yep.
Like for all of the criticism of Melbourne not being able to inject some of their stars into the game, that was due to the excellent defense goal line, especially from the Penrith Panthers, and even the fact that Liam Martin, an edge back rower, gets the man of the match. It sort of suggests that Melbourne did a great job of shutting down the star players of the Penrith Panthers. Like I think Liam Martin gets the Clive Churchill because of the effort areas of his kick chase.
Yeah. Yep.
Like that was the highlight for me, was to watch him do that repeatedly. It was phenomenal.
Yeah. And I think that when you look at the pure coaching side of it too, obviously there was a couple of things that our boys did on that day, particularly around the kick catch and those sorts of things that and there's such minute things that separate teams at the very pointy end of the competition. And from the NRL's point of view, you've got the best two teams all year playing in the last game of the year, and you've got for a big part of the game a one try differential in the game. I don't think you can ask for much more than that. So
how much do you think the group learned from the round 24 defeat? Because there was a couple of tries there that were scored. I think it was Warbrick that knocked the ball back to Katoa from memory twice. I think Katoa got 2 tries from kick, almost like second balls where they knocked back down, and they had numbers in the pitches in the picture. How much do you think they learned from that? Because then you flip to the grand final, it's on the opposite side this time. The ball goes to Coates, obviously back inside to Howarth. There's 4 Penrith players there, where round 24
was a little bit different.
Yeah.
I'm not in the day-to-day coaching meetings these days, but yeah, I know there were some key things that they took out of not only that, but also the round 1 game as well. There were some pieces that they took out of that game that, I think not altered, but sort of guided them, I suppose, in respect to some tactics that, that they were going to pull out on grand final day. So.
In terms of the celebrations, the players, the coaching staff, all deserve so much credit. Is the feeling different amongst the fans?
It's a great question. I think it is.
Does it feel the same? Like obviously when you look at Penrith's history, the Roy Simmons famous grand final, like wow, they finally got that victory. Then was it 03 or 04 with Tony Polatua and Ryan Girdler? 10 years gap, and then this team comes and they win that one. And like you say, they were away. We forget they were away in Queensland, but then they have that one in Sydney. But how is the feeling amongst the fans?
One of the, if you talk to the chairman, Pete Graham, one of the things that we'll always talk about, and Ivan will always talk about, is we talk about wanting to be a source of community pride. And what really stands out, which sort of goes towards your question, is we had a fan day on the Tuesday or the Wednesday, the week of the grand final. And I was talking to Mike Dalton, Channel 9 reporter, and Mike said, the myriad of jerseys from the chocolate soldiers, but not just the chocolate, but the chocolate V, the chocolate bars, the chocolate stripes, which then rolls into the licorice all sorts jersey, which then rolls into the Super League years, which then rolls into the straight black, which then rolls into the pink. So when you're out amongst our community at the moment and you see that myriad of jerseys that encompasses 50 odd years of history, I suppose, it actually reflects, I think, where our community support base is at the moment. We've got 10-year-olds in pink jerseys and 60-year-olds in chocolate jerseys. It's really heartwarming when you're out there in the community.
How important is that connection to community?
Yeah, it's huge. There's 3 things we talk about in football. We want to be a top 4 team. We want to be a source of community pride, and we want to be the benchmark club at getting our players ready for life after rugby league. But we can't do it without the community. The community piece is absolutely central to what we do.
How much time do, I guess, the players spend connecting with that community? Because I guess, in my time as an athlete, it probably quite selfish with my time, and it was a bit of a forced thing to go. It was like, all right, you've got a school visit, and sometimes met with a fraction of, I really should be training, but and our time is finite. But then probably not until a little bit later I realized that like there is more to the performance than the X's O's, the time spent in the gym, because there's a feeling and motivation is a huge driving factor in any level of performance. And if you get that connection to community, to feel like you're doing it for something bigger than yourself and even bigger than your teammates and your own family, if you can be motivated to do something for others, especially in, with all due respect to Penrith, a lower socio-economic demographic, that I feel like it's a real added ingredient to what Penrith have done.
We talk about it all the time. We genuinely think everyone in Penrith walks a little bit taller on a Monday after we play and get a win. It's getting harder. Like when you talk about the levels of engagement, it's getting harder with, obviously we've got some really big personalities in our team that are absolute fan favourites. But one of the things I'm most proud of, and, you've been to our games when you've done commentary, is, when we play at Penrith and when we play away, like it's nothing uncommon for our players to spend 45 minutes out on the field, just around the fences, pictures, autographs. The football manager gets annoyed with them a little bit because like we want to we want to be that source of community pride, but we don't want to be handing out a set of jerseys over the fence every week. We've got a couple of boys got to the point where they'd have to take their boots off in the middle of the field before they went to sign autographs, because they got to the point where they felt compelled to give something to fans, But it's getting harder. It's getting harder and harder, and we want to do more and more. But it's just trying to find the right time to engage. Yeah. And if you people at the NRL talk to us now about fandom, and when you were a kid, I was a South fan when I was a kid, and I followed a team, and then I fell in love with a player, Terry Fay. The fan today falls in love with the player and then falls in love with the team by default sometimes. So when we talk about the Brian To'os and the Jerome Luais and the Sonia Taruvas and the Nathan Clearys, like the game at the moment, like there's a lot of younger fans that just attach to the player, and then as a byproduct of that, we've got more and more Penrith fans.
Where do you think that comes from? That post game, I guess, lap of honor, but almost lap of I want to go and say hi to.
It's never been driven by us.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have, like every club does, you've got your family and wives and partners and friends that come to the game. We're really fortunate where they sit at Penrith is actually quite close to the fence. So, and the players are, they always want to go and see family, and, those ones that have got young kids, bring them onto the field and that sort of thing. So, when it started, it really started off the back of that first season back after COVID, where, like we've got a sign in our academy that's on the outside near the barbecue area where there's, 2,500 names of fans in 2021 or members in 2021 that pledged their membership to the club, knowing that they couldn't come and watch a game of rugby league.
Yeah.
So I think when the boys came back from that 21 season in Brisbane, it was very front and centre that they've got a community that was supporting them, when the club was in trouble, like every club was at that point coming out of COVID. And I really think it sort of grew from there, engagement with their wives and partners, but then all of a sudden, around the ground. And it's as I said, it's never been forced by us. The only thing that's forced by us is trying to get them off the field, to try and get them into the dressing shed so the coach can have a chat to them.
It is hard because I guess that you don't want to say no.
No,
and once you say yes to one fan, you almost feel compelled to say yes to everyone. And with all due respect, some people, they're not the best on their smartphones. No. Like, can we be quick? Just one more.
Well, there's a new little trick at Penrith, and the boys when they finish, they get to the tunnel. We notice some of the younger kids they get their phone and they go and they throw it.
Yes.
Down, so the player then feels obligated to pick it up and do the picture. I'm thinking, As long as the phone doesn't break when it hits the ground, that's all right. But yeah,
That's
a couple of little cheeky ones at Penrith.
That's intelligent.
Yeah,
That's
very clever.
Thinking outside the
Very
box.
clever.
Okay, well, if they're going to say no, I'm going to give them a reason. Well, you've got it in your hand. Come on.
You've got to pick it up.
You've got it in your hand. You touched on something there about what Penrith want to strive for.
Yep.
Around community, around performance.
Top 14. And we want to be the benchmark club at preparing our players for life after rugby league as they exit the game. So
sounds great. What's it look like in action?
So obviously, as every club does, big wellbeing education department. Kevy Kingston, who you would know. Kevy heads up our education and wellbeing department. Glenn Lydiard's on staff as well. Up until 12 months ago, we had Joe Nullival on staff, who's gone to work for the RLPA now. But we're really big on, players being engaged away from the game, as every club is. When the NYC competition existed, it was the old, if you're not at school and you're not studying, then you're not playing. We haven't enforced those sort of measures on the players, but Kevy showed me a engagement report a couple of weeks ago when I was putting a board report together, and of our top 30, we've got 29 players that are engaged in something, doing some sort of coursework, some sort of community work away from rugby league. And the 30th player kicks it off in the preseason. So it's not like he's not doing anything. He's what he wants to do just hasn't started yet. So, we and statistically, very broadly speaking, the players that are engaged away from rugby league play longer, get injured less, earn more money. So if that's not a precursor to a young man or a young woman to go and do something away from the game, then I don't know what is. So.
Yeah, it's not a coincidence.
No, not at all.
It certainly isn't a coincidence.
It doesn't have to be vet science. It's just something. Just something. And we do a lot of, Kevy does a lot of work with the players where it's an engagement piece to work out what they're actually interested in. Well, we're going to go and do a building course if you want to do a Cert 4 in fitness. So it's, first of all, working out where their interests lay, and then secondly, honing what we can and can't do around the training schedule.
Was that difficult to begin?
So.
Because again, a lot of athletes think, and I was guilty of this, that I had to go all in. So I started post-high school education in England. St. Helens said, do you want to come full-time? Yes. All right, I'll go all in and then I'll pick the studies up later. Never did. And I guess, there wasn't as many options available to me then, and St. Helens do a great job of it now, where they're actually connected to a college. But I kind of wouldn't help but feel I wasn't doing my real vocation, my real purpose justice there.
Yep.
Is it hard to convince those players of, hey, look, that what you've said around injured less, play longer, earn more money, that because it seems almost counterintuitive that you're not 100% football all the time.
I think there's like a tipping point with a lot of young men in particular. They come out of school and they're so focused on first grade. And they've been in education of some sort, and they want to put their eggs in one basket and they want to go all in. Probably 10 or 15 years ago, I don't think there was the flexibility in most NRL training schedules that there probably is now through mandated days off and all those sort of things that the RLPA have brought in. So I think there's probably greater flexibility in the schedule for players to be able to do it. And I think there's been a real transition, particularly in the last 10 years, of players coming out of school and actually valuing the continuation of what they've either been doing in school or started at uni through their rugby league career, knowing there's windows to do it. Whereas perhaps previously the windows weren't there, and it was, well, you got to make a decision. Mate. You're going to be all in, or you want to go and be a doctor. You decide. So I don't think that happens anywhere near as much in rugby league clubs these days. I think clubs are putting that sort of pressure on young men, like might have existed in the game 20 years ago.
Yeah. There's not that pressure to be present. And
when there's all this statistical data that says, look at the byproducts of what happens if you are engaged.
I imagine it might take some, especially, I guess culture's a funny thing. I look at culture of like the everyday actions and environments. But if you've got a culture of where that's normal, and you have a young athlete come in and they see the Isaiah Yost, the Nathan Clearys, the Luais, the Isaac Tangos doing it.
All doing it, yeah.
It's like, okay, well, I want to be like them, so then I'll do it. But, if you go back 20 years ago and you come in and say, I'm going to continue on with some education, and you see no one doing that, you quickly fall into that.
Yeah.
The culture of, well, I'm all in on football.
If you come past Kevy Kingston's office when you walk in, on the back wall, he's actually got an honour board. So it would have all our current players and what they're doing, but there would also be past players and what they've done. So you're right. You get a young man that comes in and goes, he's finished a dip ed in something, it not validates it, but yeah, certainly it is the norm.
Yeah, that's
and it just becomes field, weights, strength, rehab, education. It's part of what we're trying to achieve. So.
I like it. I think a lot of clubs are going in that direction as well, which is fantastic for the overall well-being of the person, not just the athlete. Because as I've learned, there's life after football.
You're a long time retired.
Yeah, and there is a life that you've got to live. You don't just retire and sail off into the sunset and have your autumn years. You actually, I want to go to work. I'm very fortunate the position that I'm in now, but for a lot of players, they're not as fortunate, and some of them quickly realise that.
Well, I think the average career games at the moment is 44 games. So for every hindy, 330, there's a kid that plays one or two. So no, we absolutely value it at the Penrith Panthers. So.
Obviously, winning 4 in a row and being to the last 5 grand finals can create a little bit of jealousy, perhaps, amongst other clubs. Now, I'm of the opinion that those clubs should look at the clues that have been left by success of the Panthers and strive to be there. Some would hold their hands up and say, we don't have those resources. And even make the argument that it's not good for the game as a whole to have one team be so dominant for so long and it not look like it be going to slow down anytime in the near future. What are your thoughts on, I guess, comments like that?
I suppose the underlying part of that is we've had to shed $1 million worth of players out of the cap every year. So when we the one team having multiple years of success, like I can understand from a point of view that some people would, is that healthy for the competition? But the reality is we haven't done it with the same team. We've lost substantially two at a minimum, but circa $1 million out of the cap every year for the last 4 years that we've done it. And in some ways, I think at times we are a little bit of a copycat league. Like obviously Ivan's spoken about it quite openly about his belief around Melbourne and being the absolute benchmark, for the last 2 decades. And a lot of people would sit back and say, well, we love the way they do that, and we love the way they do that. And I'm sure that there's clubs out at the moment looking at the Penrith Panthers saying we really admire the way they do that, and maybe we should do a bit more of that. Bring it on. Like, that's great. Yeah. The fact that you want to replicate something that we're doing at the moment, that makes us, feel 10 foot tall. But yeah, I think people lose sight of the fact that the success that this team has had at the moment has been off the back of shedding $1 million worth of players out of the cap every year, which validates the development system, I suppose. So.
I guess imitation is the greatest form of flattery. But again, in order to, like, if you were designing a competition, you probably wouldn't want to what has happened with Penrith to happen. Like, just from an outside looking in, you'd think we need to keep spread out the talent, or distribute the talent more evenly, or have a system that involves a different finalist each and every year, kind of like what it used to be, kind of. What would your thoughts be around if the NRL were to take over the youth competition and it become almost like a draft system?
So I'm on a working group at the moment with Ben Eichen and a number of Trent Robbo's on the group, Frank Panisi from the Storm, handful of people from the NRL, Louise Lanigan from the Broncos, the CFO up there. And it's a pathways review. It's looking at everything from like under 13s all the way through to, potentially a national 21s comp. And part of that conversation is around a draft. Now, clearly, the rugby league landscape from 50 years ago looks dramatically different today because as the population has gone west, the borders of rugby league haven't necessarily changed. So the Penrith district, we have 9,500 kids that play rugby league in our backyard. The Parramatta Eels would have 6,000. The Dogs might have 4,000. So there's an unequal playing field to start with.
Yeah,
and I understand that completely. In saying that, we still start with the same amount of kids in development programs to get to an NRL team. Part of this conversation is around a draft, and whether a draft would be the right way to go. I truly believe that the only way that a draft could operate in our game is if the game took over the whole of game development that's sat underneath it. Now, that'd be a monumental.
You're right.
That'd be a monumental shift.
It would definitely need that.
Yeah. And at this point in time, clubs are the best people at developing players. And I think the things that people are looking for in a draft, you can actually achieve via the contracting model, tinkering with the contracting model.
How so?
The salary cap and the contracting model is the most blunt instrument we have of talent equalisation. So you can only fit 30 players into that figure.
Mm.
So if you worked around, areas of the salary cap and how we contract players and what you can and can't have, that would create the talent equalisation that people think they're striving for. The reality is, some clubs can take their salary cap and maximise it and actually create greater value than what the number says. And at the moment, some clubs can take their salary cap and they don't potentially get the maximum value out of what they've got, whether that be through, historical cap decisions that they've made or a whole range of things. But instead of going down a draft model, which would then take development away from the clubs and impose that development framework on the game, which I don't know if the game's resourced at the moment to do that, but the clubs certainly are. We've never had better broadcast numbers. We've never had, the game itself is flourishing.
Yeah.
And part of this, there's always bits we can improve through this pathways review. But I wouldn't be knocking down the door to change massive parts of the fabric of the game based on the Penrith Panthers being successful for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it is so interesting how that, I guess that structure of junior pathways maybe is equalised. I guess for the big advantage of the Panthers is the sheer size of the participation numbers, which you look at most sports, the more participants, the higher the level of the competition.
The more in, the more out.
Yeah, so...
But in saying that, we also signed Paul Alamotti where he was unwanted by a number of clubs.
That...
so that it can't all just be...
No.
It can't all just come down to you start with more kids.
Yeah.
There's more to the business model than that. So.
Also, you have people like Isaiah Yob that didn't come through, I guess, a Penrith system. Fisher Harris, from overseas.
Both recruited.
Yep. Moses
is a local.
Yeah. But there has been a number of, I think, was Nathan Cleary, I guess, an Auckland kid? Technically speaking, but
came with dad at 14 and the family moved back to Australia.
How far is the net cast when it comes to recruiting those younger, more talented players like a Fisher Harris or an Isaiah?
So we don't recruit out of New Zealand.
So how did you get Fish?
Currently.
Currently.
Yeah. So Fish. So our model at the moment, and has been for probably the successful years, is we don't recruit out in New Zealand. That's not to say we don't have New Zealand players in our system. We don't recruit out of far north Queensland. And again, we're probably fortunate at the moment that our model is more of a retention model than a recruitment model. We've got a lot of good kids in the system and we want to keep the ones that we want to keep, and then we need to backfill them with what we don't have. We're really fortunate that we've got great working relationships with player managers. So it's quite often I've got this guy, what about this? I've seen this guy here. There's some very strategic recruitment that comes out of maybe southeast Queensland at the moment. But our main focus, our main priority for the last half a dozen years has been the Western Corridor, Bathurst, Forbes, Dubbo, Parks, that regional area out through there. Obviously, club takes a game out there once a year. We've got 3 regional academies that we help sort of facilitate out there in conjunction with the Reston Rams. Then if you look at our roster at the moment, like Marto has come out of that program, Yowie has come out of that program. Dylan, not so much that Western Corridor, but definitely country. So it works for us. It works with us. It complements what we do out there from a regional footprint.
When you have so many athletes or potential athletes, what do you look for in talent identification? I mean, obviously the football does the talking, but
Fitness.
That's it.
That's the start. Like in to be able to play in Ivan's system, you got to be fit. And if you can't do that, then
no good to us.
Well, you're not no good to us, but you're gonna be on the back foot for large chunks of what we're doing, and then we'll work with that if we think if the fitness isn't there, but these other aspects are just too good to knock back, then we'll work on the other things.
Is there a specific fitness test or markers
they do the same tests that everyone else does, but it's the combination of being fit and when under the pump, like the resilience level that goes with it. Everyone talks about Dylan every summer. Like Dylan is a freak, from a fitness point of view. And it's one thing to be able to run up and down the field in a yo-yo test when it's totally unrelated, or partially unrelated to how the game's played. Yeah. But then to be able to, it's the transference of that into the contest. That's the bit we really go looking for.
Yeah,
we're seeking.
So you don't look for I guess, like physical traits or anything like that.
All of those things, but it starts with fitness.
Yeah,
it's got to start there.
Is there any quirky things like, I guess, wingspan or?
No, not really.
Nothing.
No, Ivan will talk about the coffee test.
What's the coffee test?
The coffee test is meeting the player.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
That's just a big thing for us.
Bit of character. Or?
I heard Craig Bellamy was talking the other day, took someone out, and it was, his interest was the please and thank yous and those sorts of things. I'm sure every coach does it, but we talk about the coffee test. You meet a young player like Paul Alamotti. It was a lunch test. It wasn't a coffee test, but he passed the coffee test, so we continued the conversation. So
that's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah. But getting back to your question, it starts with fitness, and then I suppose, like I worked at the Eels years ago, and Brian was fascinated with big, tall outside backs.
Yeah,
and I left the Eels and went to the Panthers, and I'd left, Jared, Eric, Krishnan, Joel Reddy, like Ben Smith, 6'2", and if you look at our team now, like we don't have those, we don't have big, tall outside backs, but it's probably highlights. Well, there's not one model that actually is a must-have.
It's interesting because I know like NBA basketball, the talent scouts, because they have that college system and they're looking to recruit, and the draft system. They're very big on wingspan, height.
Yep.
They do a number of athletic tests as well, which I guess they're looking to then what they can mold that athlete to be and develop. But fitness, I mean,
when we talk about our junior system, our pathways manager Lee Hopkins, like I was talking to someone about this morning. If you think the finished athlete is here and the Harold Matthews player is here, we quite often talk about like this finished athlete needs to know how to do his quadratic equations. So it's the Harold Matthews coach's responsibility to teach the player his times tables. And then the SG Ball coach's responsibility to teach him whatever the next layer of that work is. And then the flag coach to teach that player the next layer of that work, in order to get to the start of a preseason where the Pathways team can hand over a physically equipped athlete to the coach to work out whether he can play rugby league.
So when a player comes into the top 30, for instance, or is on one of those development contracts, that Ivan's trusted the people along the way in that pathway system that these guys are fit enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't be handing them over to me.
Yeah. So we talk about alignment all the time. So what Ivan does with this age group up here is aligned. Sorry, other way around. What the Harold Matthews coach is doing with this age group here, or the Tarshigar, Lisa Fiola, whatever the team is aligned to the values and expectations and outcomes that we're looking for at the top level. To the point where our flag coach is a full-time employee, John O'Rolph. So he would be out on the field with the NRL watching every morning over summer. His responsibility is not only to go back and decipher what parts he needs to instill into his program at 21's level, but he would then write the program for the under-19 athlete, the under-17 athlete, the under-15 athlete. And then he would sit with those coaches and go, okay, this is what we need out of this program. Don't worry about what you saw on TV on Friday night. Grip carry, catch pass, tackle tech, like this. So we have a syllabus of rugby league that the players work their way through. And no one, obviously there's going to be the Jesse McLean, Casey McLean that might jump a stage.
Yeah.
But when they jump a stage, they jump the stage with us knowing that they're physically equipped to jump the stage, and they've got a huge base to rely on when it actually gets a bit tough and they need a little bit of help. So
I've got to admire that the fundamental ingredient is conditioning, it's fitness, is being able to repeat effort when you've got not much left in the petrol tank. Yep, absolutely.
There was a game, was it the Roosters game? Nathan has the kick charge down. Roosters player picks it up, runs, gets tackled.
I remember it.
Gets tackled on the try line. Gets up to play the ball. The Roosters player is not quite at dummy half, but the Panthers they're back on the try line.
I remember it well.
So otherwise, it's a two pass or a kick into the corner, and it's a try in the corner. They're the bits where we value it. That they're not the sexy bits, but they're the bits that
matter.
That make the difference. So.
They do. The conditioning element makes the difference. I think it's a big lesson to any parent, any coach, any aspiring impressionable athlete out there is, look, talent will get you so far, but if you are fit, you'll go further, because fatigue makes cowards of us all.
It underpins absolutely everything we do with our players. So. And that the importance of it here is actually instilled in 15, 16, 17, 18, 9-year-old.
You don't just wake up and want to be fit.
No. And we understand that it might take an athlete 2 years, 3 years to build a base. Like it's not, we don't run them around the field at 15 and go out, in, out. Like we don't, But if you want to get from here to here, there's a journey that you need to go on. So.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not built overnight.
No, not at all.
No, because I get, when you're probably a bit younger, you're just playing the game because you enjoy it. And if you happen to be good at it, you most likely keep going. But then when it starts to become serious, I guess that's where you have to hand yourself over to the staff and say, get me fit and push me through as well.
And explain why.
Yeah.
That's, it's another thing I think we do really well. So.
Explain to the athlete or the parents?
Probably a bit of both. Yeah. Depending on the age, I suppose. Like, again, our Pathways team, we get the players, we get the parents in at the start of every preseason, run down on, I try to get over and talk to them. I haven't got a logo on today, but I stand up in front of them and say, you're in this gang now. And there's expectations that come with this, so, we don't expect a room full of brain surgeons, but we want everyone, the man who's done his best has done enough. That's what we're looking for. So we make it very clear at the start. We don't sort of like it, we're not trying to scare people, but we're trying to make it very clear that we're a win-loss business at the very pointy end. We're here for a reason. So you spoke earlier about the consequence of success is rivals will come to take some of the best performers within the group, staff included,
players and staff.
Yep.
I guess from a player point of view, how does that look for you when you have a player coming off contract? Inevitably, it's going to be a bid, a higher bid, I guess a more financial more financially attractive offer from another club.
Yep.
How does it work for you when you sit down with that said player?
I got the best job in the world because I get to grab a young man or a young lady at times and offer them what they've been dreaming to do in terms of not so much with the girls at the moment, but definitely with the boys, like an NRL contract. At the same time, I've also got the worst job in the world where sometimes it's like we're going in a different direction and we're not going to renew your contract. I suppose the thing that Ivan and I think we do really well is we've been incredibly transparent with the players. Because you've probably got three scenarios. You've got the player that's coming to the end and we just all agree that we're not going to renew that contract. You've got the player who's mid-contract and clearly we don't want to lose, so we're going to get in earlier and talk to the manager and, either make that upgrade or adjustment and that extension, and that's done, relatively quietly behind closed doors, and then it's a media announcement. Oh, he's got 18 months to go, but we'd like to, we'd like to be really proactive. We've at the moment we've got our cap. When I say planned out, we go out to 2028 at the moment. So I could tell you what we think the starting team will look like for the next 4 years. But then there's
as far ahead as that. So next season, 25, 26, so 4 years ahead.
Yeah. So I've got three.
You've got those jigsaw pieces.
Three moving pieces at the moment with three players that come off contract at the end of 26. So are they here? They're not here. They're here for longer. They're here for shorter. Apart from those three, the starting 13 at the Panthers is pretty much locked. So based on form, of course.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
But then the other conversation that you're referring to is the one in the middle where, we love you, we don't want to lose you. We got $5, but the club down the road, they love you as well, and they got $10. So what are we going to do here? And the reality for a lot of players is there's I feel like, and you might be able to talk to it. There's a point in time, and we are striving when we talk to players about contracts and valuations and those sorts of things. We are absolutely striving to get to a point where when we do a contract, we feel that it's a good contract for the club and it's a good contract for the player, and the management is happy with it. That's the perfect scenario for what we do. Then the reality, there's going to be some contracts where the club probably gets the upper hand in it and the player doesn't. And then at a point in time that dynamic might shift where we go, actually, we thought you're undervalued there, so we're going to make that change, and I'm comfortable enough to, sometimes the club gets a win, especially younger kids coming in, and then we go, well, we've got to change these circumstances. But then also there's situations, where you end up with, you get a deal done, and on reflection, you look back and sometimes you go, well, that's, I'm not happy with that deal. I feel like that deal's very much one way, and I don't feel like we're all, sharing the risk and reward out of the contract. So, but with a lot of our players, particularly those players that have left the club in the last 4 or 5 years, it's been a situation where, we go to great lengths to benchmark players against current NRL data that we've got. I talk to other player managers about what's James Graham's, what do you think he's worth? So I feel like we value our players very well. But the reality is there's going to be clubs that are going to say, well, we value him a little bit higher because we don't have what you've got. We're in a rebuild. He has an aspect to his game that we think you've actually undervalued, that sort of thing. So, and what we've tried to do more often than not is we've gone to the player and said, look, this is where we're at. We are more than comfortable if you want to go and test the market and then come back, and I'll tell you within 24 hours whether we're in or we're out. And if you look at the players that have left, it's, not every player, but that's pretty much how they've all happened. Yeah. We've done a valuation of where we sit. We've said, look, go out and have a look. And then, and in some instances we've just been like blown off the park. Yeah. And you go, I'll drive you down to sign that, mate. You got to take that. That's life-changing for you at your age. You got to take that contract. And then you get the shits for a day. And then you wake up to yourself and you go, that young man's life has just been changed, and you've been a part of it up till now. So pull your head in and get on with it. And I think 18 of the last 27 players to leave our club have gone on to sign the biggest contracts they've ever signed.
When you look at your salary cap, obviously you've got it mapped out up until 2028. Is there structure to it in terms of this player in this position has a certain value, and or a range, or we can only afford in the starting centres, we can afford $1 million, and that's split either 800, 200. It's split 750, 250. It's 500, 500. Is that the way? Yeah, it sort of tends to work.
There's some methodology around it. Not so much like that. We have a calculation of what we think the starting 13 should absorb of the salary cap. So if you add those 13 wages together, it should take up X percentage.
Can you tell us what the percentage is?
Sorry, can't.
Is it?
It's a number between 1 and 100.
Is it based off any particular principle?
Well, data. Now that we feel like we have 5 years of consistent data, and data that tells us that, like, through success, that it's valid. The data's valid. So we think we should spend X amount of money on, like, it was a newspaper article a couple of weeks ago where they compared the amount of money that each club had absorbed in the spine in those 4 players. Similar concept. So we've got a couple of those things that we run. That should account for that. We're really big on player versatility. So if you're not in that starting 13, like we love, like when we talk about the Paul Alamolis of the world, we love a player that can be in the second column that can play 2 positions. So we value that. And we've got some other little bits and pieces that not heavy mathematical modelling, not like that, just beliefs that we feel that, the cap should be balanced. We should have X amount of front rowers. We should have this. We should have that. So,
but and I know a lot of our listeners, when they play buy round bingo, they hear Price's law and Pareto principle. Do you ever look at things like that? Like, okay, my 179 is going to contribute to probably 40% of the output of this team.
No, we don't.
So we need to.
No, we've got some. We talk about making disciplined salary cap decisions. So you can either make disciplined decisions or undisciplined decisions. And I think sometimes, like, you can absolutely fall in love with a young man that's come through your system and has been very successful, and we think he's worth $5, but we get pressed and you've got to pay him $7, and then you just go, was that really disciplined? And I think we've been able to manage the cap. We've got 11 people in our salary cap meeting, which I know people sort of laugh about. No, you got too many people. It sort of works for us. Like, we've got, and Ivan is a great collaborator. He's interested in what the assistant coaches are thinking. He's interested in what the group CEO thinks. He's interested in what I think. So we've just got some not rules, but some guiding principles, I suppose, on how we manage it, and we just try and stick to those guiding principles.
So it's not an algorithm.
No. Other than we think we should be spending that much money on the starting.
So is there ever wiggle room with players?
We've exceeded it once
in
the 22 season, and we're still successful, but we didn't exceed it dramatically. But it's one of those numbers that where the CFOs set it up in a way where when it goes from that number to that number, it goes from green to red. So it's like, it's only by.
So would that be, I guess, a current player has received an offer, and then the current player comes back to you and you've said, look, that's my final offer. And they've said, look, if you could just move it north a fraction, that will, I've done my calculations on my life after football plan, on my mortgage, or my cost of living expenses, and I'm not far off staying. And and that's when that conversation.
And when you talk about that, just moving a little bit there or moving a little bit there, like one of the guiding principles is the underspend. Like we ensure that we carry what I think is a reasonably healthy underspend. So we never run the cap up to its limit and go, we've got a problem. Like if that kid and the other thing is there's no options in any of our contracts
Ever.
There's no
Good.
There's
That's
no
how a club should run.
There's no salary state of origin bonuses. There's no so you can when you model it, you can model it knowing that you're not going to get Lindsay Smith's been picked for Australia.
Yeah.
You know, as an example.
Shit, what are we going to now he's on X amount.
So there's nothing that we can't manage.
Yeah,
nothing that grabs us out of the left field.
Yeah.
We haven't accounted for that. So
yeah. So obviously the Fisher Harris incident that was and I guess an emotional plea, which
100%.
I guess would have, like you've spoken about before, that it shocked you, but there's no way a player option is if someone comes or a player manager comes with a player option, even if it's a Nathan or an Isaiah or a Dylan,
we're actually it's board approval. That's mandated by the board, the Panthers board.
Yeah.
So when I'm negotiating, I can't put any form of I can put a club option in, but it's mandated by the Panthers board. Options don't exist at Penrith. So.
A lot of clubs should learn from that.
So you know what you're dealing with, and it sounds very simple. And I suppose too, like when you look at a lot of those sort of bonuses that might have existed in contracts 15, 20 years ago, like particularly around Origin, like players weren't getting paid what they're getting paid now to play Origin.
Yeah.
So when you go, we've got this great player and he's playing Origin, he deserves a little bit. Of course he does. But the reality is now he gets paid by New South Wales Rugby League or Queensland Rugby League. So why would you pay the player twice for achieving the same thing? So
it was a couple of years ago. I remember reading that actually Penrith won the comp and they were paying in excess of $1 million to players that are playing at other clubs.
Yes.
You're smiling. Does that add to the level of achievement that you were operating on 85% cap?
88, yep.
It was 88%,
give or take. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Look, there was a number of reasons why we made some changes in the roster at that point in time. And again, like you look at some of the players that left the club, they've gone on and absolutely flourished at other clubs that they're at. So, when people talk about terminations, like sometimes terminations, like everyone, like the very nature of a termination, people think it is a bad thing. Sometimes the termination gives Club A the flexibility to do something else with their list management, and it gives player B the opportunity to take up something at another club where they're actually in a environment where they flourish. I different example, but when I was a young coach, I coached Dave Williams at the Eels, and we just couldn't get him going for whatever reason. And he went to Manly and won a comp and played for Australia within 2 years.
Yeah,
it was just something in the water.
Yeah,
like not everyone's a perfect fit for everyone. So,
well, in terms of like the rules or the structure or the guiding principles of the cap, was that something that was difficult to manage, that we're going to actually pay part of a player's wage to play somewhere else and against us?
No, not really. No.
It was
not based on the outcomes we were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So, and at the end of the day, if you want to do this, and sometimes there's a price to pay, and that was the price. So that was the 2021 season. That
was 2021. I remember it well, and just like I think it speaks volumes about what Penrith are actually doing there, because most clubs that pay other players to play at other clubs, it doesn't tend to work out so well.
Yeah, it's not an ideal scenario, but as I said, our experiences, the players that were involved at that point in time, to a man, they've all gone on and flourished in other environments, which,
On that flourishing, and I think you're never going to get every decision right. Have you ever looked with the benefit of hindsight and gone, got that one wrong, or we should have, in terms of the starting 13, we should have allocated a little bit more money to that particular player?
Me personally, no, but I don't coach the team.
Yeah.
I manage the list. I manage the economics behind it. But for me, it like you're never going to get them all right.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we don't get them right, we get the person right. We just get the valuation wrong. You know, like I feel I'm comfortable in the last 5 or 6 years at our place. Like we've got every person right.
Yeah.
Sometimes we've thought they'll end up here and they've only ended up here type of thing. So
Yeah.
and as a result, the valuation becomes you know, like, yeah, but he should be doing this because we're giving him this money, but he's only outputting that. But he's still a great human.
Yeah.
So I think we get the human part of it right consistently. You know, and when we do get them wrong, not that we get a lot wrong, but it's the valuation sometimes.
Or a player at another club that you've gone like, well, wow. Like I'm thinking of a Stephen Crichton, where you know the Bulldogs had to pay more money to get it to prize him from Penrith. But I think he's now exceeding what maybe the Bulldogs even thought he would bring, and he's become a value for money signing for the Bulldogs in my opinion.
And the leadership side of it, like you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, maybe you can.
True.
Maybe you can. I guess it's something that would be hard to quantify. There's no, I can do a fitness test, a under fatigue test, a Bronco, a 1.2 time trial, whatever it may be. But I guess there are a number of ways you can figure out leadership. But with Stephen Crichton in particular, I think he's someone that when I look at Penrith, I think, and again, what you've achieved is an amazing feat. But in our industry, what we're looking for the perfect game, which never exists. With someone like Stephen, was there ever any thought of like, we maybe should have reshaped the jigsaw?
I think if you talk to Ivan, he probably thinks that. Like you would probably have a different view on it. Again, for me, I get quite removed from it because, as I said, it's part of my job is I'm the guy that offers them the first big one when they come out of school, and quite often I'm the guy that is the bearer of bad news at some point in time, either, to the player or to the manager or whoever. So, yeah, I'm sure Ivan probably has a different view on it because, Stephen's a great guy. He's getting married today, actually.
Oh.
He's a great guy, great player. We loved him. At the end of the day, what the Dogs offered, we couldn't match. It was as simple as that. So, I go back a step. We could have matched it.
Yes.
But then is that a disciplined salary cap decision? So I quite often say to people, at the wedding and, the salary cap. And I go, all right, okay, think of it like this. You've got a household budget to run. You need electricity to run these lights. Okay, Nathan's the electricity. We all agree with that. Nathan's the electricity. You got to have electricity. Yes. Okay, who's the water? Okay, Yoey's the water.
Yep.
You need water. Okay, tick, Yoey's the water. Now, when you get to the other end of that conversation, you got to make the decision. Do you want Foxtel, or can you get BritBox and KO to achieve the same things that you're paying for Foxtel? So at some point in time, in my household budget, I've got to decide, do I want to pay $150 a month for Foxtel to get the footy and those other things, or do I want to pay, I wouldn't even know what KO is. No, I'll just get KO and I might get BritBox. Yeah. And that'll keep me happy for now. That's the salary cap. That's the decision. Like everyone, that's a shit decision you blokes made. That's we'll put it in your world.
Our resources are finite.
Yep.
Yeah. We don't have an endless budget. You're not a Manchester City.
Yeah. Household income is finite. So at some point in time, you got to make the decision. Do you want to get the car registered? You can put new tyres on it to pass rego, or do you want Foxtel? You tell me. I do
roughly,
it. Sometimes I do it like in a cheeky way.
I guess, even arguing against myself is that maybe coming out of perhaps the shadows of your Nathans, your Isaiahs, your Martins and Edwards has actually helped Stephen flourish.
For sure. Yeah, I often wonder that. Like his leadership skills have, absolutely, grown since he's gone to the Dogs. And if it had been in our environment today, would he have had the clear air and the space? to be able to do that, and the responsibility that Ciro's given him, obviously.
Yeah, it probably wasn't necessary.
The Panthers,
not
in our group at the moment.
No.
So
inadvertently, I've got this thought that by moving on these players, it actually. Now, there's plenty of other clubs that have been in this situation where it hasn't happened, but it evolves the playing style. It brings in fresh motivation. It requires a bit of a rethink for how Ivan coaches his players.
Yep.
I actually look at Sir Alex Ferguson, who said you can't allow teams to grow old together. And he would often, despite winning the league, he'd normally have two big summer signings each and every year. Now, it is a little bit different because that's bringing in extra quality to what is an already was an amazingly stacked team. But he would constantly talk about refreshing. You need to do it annually to just change the mood in the camp. Have him rethink about, okay, well, now we're gonna utilize this person's skills, and that I think that there's a possibility that, not by design, but it's actually added to Penrith by how they've evolved. I think about the change from Appy Coruscant to Mitch Kenny.
Yep.
Like, completely different hookers.
Well, when Appy came, we needed Appy to help those halves deliver.
Yeah.
Develop.
Yeah.
But then there was a transition point where the halves had developed to a point where, whether it was Appy or Mitch, it was probably and Appy's a great player, don't get me wrong, but was it so critical that Appy touched the ball before anyone else? Not as critical as it was 18 months prior to that. So when, that situation that we went to where we got $5, but the Tigers, they got $10. And Appy goes and Mitch falls into that position, and the balancing act goes again, and reinvigorates the team. They play a different style of footy. And Ivan will say that, his responsibility is to reshape the team at various times during its evolution, I suppose. The Fish, when I think we spoke about it, a couple of weeks ago, when Fish left, there's no other James Fisher-Harris out there. So we didn't go, and we got attached to Stefano on day one. We've never had a conversation with Stefano. He was on contract with another club, which is part of the reason, but we went, well, there's no other James. But what about Papali'i? Okay, so does that give Nathan a new toy to play with next time? So it's exactly what you're saying. It's reinvigorating the list, and do we play a slightly different style of footy next year? I don't know. That's not my job. But
it makes it harder to figure out, right? Just as you think you've got Penrith figured out with Appy, Mitch Kenny comes along, which completely changes the dynamics of the team, and I think it actually helps.
And Blaze Talangi is the other one.
Yeah. Blaze Talangi, just as you think you've got the combination of Luai and Cleary figured out, well, now Nathan's going to have to figure out a different style of play and also as well bring in fresh motivation.
Yep.
Because I'm imagining those feelings that we spoke about at the start and I heard Nathan speak on radio after the victory 10 days ago, was I want to deliver this feeling to others that haven't felt it yet.
And I suppose, we talk about Blaze, but we've also got a young kid in our system, Jack Cole, who's played in the World Club Challenge 10 months ago. And even with Blaze, we think Blaze is a first grader, but when we had the conversation with Blaze, it was, he's going to be this, he's going to be that. And we said to Blaze and his family and his manager, how about we teach you how to be a first grader, then we'll worry about where you're going to play, because he's got that dynamic. He can play six, he could play in the centres. And Jack's very similar. Jack can play both those positions as well. So, again, the team will, this summer, everyone will have an opportunity to start again, and it'll be coaches' responsibility to put them through their paces and work out what are we going to look like in 2025.
Where can the team look to further, or I guess more the organisation, further flourish and improve? Obviously, you've got a new stadium on the cards, but like I said earlier, that in professional sport you're striving for perfection. I don't think anyone's ever played the perfect game for 80 minutes or 90 minutes if it goes into extra time. But how can the organisation improve?
Part of my job, I feel, is to future-proof the business. So when we talk about future-proofing, we talk about the pathways. I spoke earlier, I feel like our starting 13 with a couple of, question marks pretty much locked through to 2027 based on performance. But there's going to be a point in time where, that player aren't going to be in our system anymore. And I feel like the strength of the Panthers at present is I feel like the pathways system that we've built works. It has a return on the investment. The club invests maybe a tick over $3 million a year into pathways. So pretty much everything that sits outside the NRL, regional development, our own backyard, junior league, all that sort of thing. So I feel like as far as I'm concerned, there's no reason. I'm not going to be brash enough to sit here and say that we're going to win the comp for the next 5 years, but there's no reason why the pieces of the puzzle that we've built over the last 5 years and when you put all those pieces together, why we can't maintain consistent success and what consistent success looks like. That's going to change every year. But
does expansion concern you? Is that something, when you look at what you've built, the systems implied, the design, and you talk about the $5 versus the $10. When with an extreme event like expansion, is there a concern there that $10 from other clubs could become 15?
Oh, it has. If you look at Isaiah Katoa, one of the better players coming through our junior system when Redcliffe came into the competition. And again, we had a valuation on him that was in line with where we had placed similar players at that age in similar years. So it wasn't, I don't think it was overs, I don't think it was unders, but, the Dolphins come in, they paid him twice, if not more, than what we were prepared to pay him at that point in time. And again, like some would argue that he was sitting behind Jerome and Nathan, so you can't begrudge the kid an opportunity, which I've got no dramas with that. I think what the clubs are concerned about when you talk about expansion is in that model where we need to find more players to play first grade. And the natural reaction is to go, well, I'm going to take him from that club and him from that club and him from that club. That just the system or the model that sits in the background in terms of the reward to those clubs for the development that they have put into that player is fair and equitable. And at the moment, there's a big conversation about whether it is fair and equitable. So,
but what about one of those new teams coming after an already established star or two?
I think it's inevitable.
Yeah,
I think it's inevitable. So
so like if you're
and my job is to make coming to work at the Penrith Panthers such an experience that no one ever wants to leave.
How'd you do that?
We create a great environment. We have good people. We have good coaches. I think if you said to me, why are we different to everyone else? I say to people, I think we educate very well. I'm not saying we educate better, but I think we educate our players very well. And I think that's reflected in the way that they play the game. But it is inevitable.
Yeah.
It's, and it will get to a point where I'm sure for some players where there's an opportunity at the back end of their career to, you can only give me $5 and I've played for $5 for a long time and I've got really 3 years of my working career in rugby league left and I'm going to take this opportunity. And I would never begrudge a player that opportunity. Where it catches us out is sometimes when it's not planned at our end, and when we lose a player and then we go, well, we didn't actually account for that. It's actually put us on the back foot a little bit. So, but it is inevitable, I think. So,
I guess one of the ideas that I have around expansion would be an expansion draft, and maybe it would be difficult because we don't have a draft system here in Australia. But if I guess, and this requires some more thinking, but the contracts are registered with the NRL. If the NRL were to say, look, for the greater good of the game, what we're going to do is we're going to give every single contracted player the opportunity to speak to one or two of the new franchises. Like the years, if they elect not to sign that player, then they'll just remain at their current club. But if they want to make a bid for even a Jason Tamalola who's locked up for 10 years, or Cherry Evans that was locked up for 10 years, or a Nathan Cleary that's locked up to 28, he's now he's potentially available. Is that something that I guess you would entertain, or would you be fearful of, or?
It would be the level of transparency would be the question mark. And I agree that whatever they do from an expansion point of view, I feel like the next time around there needs to be a longer runway into it. I think everyone agrees with that. But the problem with that is the longer runway, but you still can't talk to players till 1 November of the year prior to you want to start, which, so I think if they could come up with a transparent way of addressing that, I don't think clubs would lose their minds over it, but it's the transparency that everyone's worried about. So,
you spoke about this magnificent environment, this pathway system that Penrith have produced. A lot of NRL clubs this time of year will go on research and development trips, go to the Premier League, the NFL, Major League Baseball to look and try and see some ideas that are going on in other sports or other professional organizations that have been successful. Do many of those sports come to you?
No.
I find that
we've had
insane.
Formed a little bit of a working relationship with the Swans, and more so not necessarily on a coaching or performance level, more like above that from a football management level. A little bit with the Thunder, the Sydney Thunder. Trent Copeland's obviously taken over as the GM there. So, and again, that's more of a commercial type of conversation that we're having at the moment. But we get like there's always a few people coming and going. Like Sam Moa came out during the year and spent a week.
Yeah.
There's a coach, a friend of someone from New Zealand who's come out we don't have.
There's no other professional organisations ever hit the Panthers up from overseas to say, hey, how are you guys running things here?
Not really. One of the things that we do when it happens, I've got a good friend, Ben Sawyer, who coaches the women's national cricket team in New Zealand. And he was the Australian women's assistant coach a couple of years ago when they won the World Cup. And he came out, and when we, in those rare occasions that it does happen, the precursor or the prerequisite is they have to present to us. So we'll tell you, we'll answer all your questions.
Yeah.
But you got to give us an hour of your world. You got to tell us what you're doing. Because more often than not, people go on a PD trip and it's all one way.
Yeah.
But we've actually said to people when they've come out, like, you present to us. Sort of puts them on the back foot a little bit sometimes.
I like what you do there. Yeah. I think that's intelligent. I'm surprised like Australian rugby union haven't come to investigate or try and get.
We had Eddie Jones in the AU when Siebes was working for Eddie. They came out and spent a couple of days. That's maybe Ciro was still at the club, so it's 18 months ago. But no, not in. My phone is not ringing off the hook with people asking if they could come out and.
I feel like there's so much.
And
you could offer the sport in.
I feel like we're quite an open organisation as well. Like when we built the academy out the back, the academy's 8 years old now. Like every club came through it. Every NRL, the physical building. Yeah. Because a couple of clubs had done it, but it was like the new bright shiny toy. Everyone builds an academy. Every club goes through and goes, oh, that's cool. That's cool. But yeah, we don't. I feel like we're open and accommodating. Like this relationship with the Swans, it started off just as a very polite conversation about how we will manage some insurance aspects of, player contracts and that sort of thing. And it's turned into we've gone and visited each other's academies and met coaches and those sorts of things. But
yeah, I feel like the sporting world is missing out.
Yeah, but you're right. Like this time of year, nearly every coach in the NRL or assistant coaches are off. Like not so much our coach or Ben Gardner's coaching the Samoan team, so he's overseas at the moment. Ivan's in Sydney, but our physios, our performance staff are actually out doing some stuff at the moment, looking at hamstring data and
Yeah.
those sorts of things.
Looking to make minor improvement. Seeing how they.
One of the guys is in LA. I think one of the guys is going to Manchester, and the performance guys going somewhere else. Yeah. So,
next season.
Yep.
Obviously, starting in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Is that something that you were keen to?
Yes.
To be a part of?
Yeah. So, obviously, we're losing Penrith Park, Bluebet Stadium, for the next 2 seasons. So, we see the next 24 months as an opportunity from a commercial point of view. If there's opportunities to take games away, in a balanced view that we're not taking too many games away from our membership base. Like, we don't want to just only offer 6 home games to a membership base. We don't think that's fair. So next year we'll play a game in Vegas. We'll play at Magic Round as the home team. We'll continue our regional relationship with Bathurst. We'll take a game out there, but we're also going to take a game to Mudgee next year. So we'll play 4 games away, 8 games at Combank Stadium. So
I'll come back to that about where and why you play in certain areas. But Nathan came up with a great idea on the World Club Challenge.
Yes, I've heard. I didn't know Nathan was working for the NRL.
Mate, it was brilliant. I was like,
in theory,
this guy's a genius.
In theory,
well, it doesn't impact it. All Penrith have to give up is a bye.
Yeah, but there's a commercial arrangement that's already in place with the NRL for the next 3 years to be the home team at Brisbane.
You'd still be the home team, it's just the World Club Challenge.
But there's a commercial arrangement to play there against a certain opponent.
You've got to play a certain opponent.
Yeah. So
the devil's in the detail, Nathan.
Yeah. Again, like when you sort of go, I've been trading emails with Chris Redlinski overnight.
Yeah.
And the window is just so small.
For them.
For us.
Or for
just with mandated leave, which then rolls into mandated training periods before you can play, like the window to play that game, and then complicated by Vegas being like round 0.
Oh, so you were actually attempting to have it?
We've been looking at it. Is there a way that we can get it? We just, from Penrith's point of view, Chris is keen to get it on. But from the Panthers' point of view, like we're just really struggling at the moment we just can't see where it fits in the schedule. So based on all the other requirements.
So it would be February. The only real opportunity would be February pre-Vegas, right? In the pre-season challenge.
But we've got a bulk of players that won't have met the return to play commitments. So
Could that be waived?
Well, it could be, but this is the 5th pre-season in a row where we've started late.
Yeah.
So our decision is more about player well-being at the moment.
Yeah.
So this is the 5th year in a row where we've got players that have come back the first week of January, and we're expecting them to play in this instance, a grand final in the second week in February.
Yeah. Just on Nathan's idea, I mean, I think it's worth going to the NRL to reconsider, because it gives them an extra game and an extra game to their broadcast partners as well.
Maybe when Nathan gets back from England, he can make an appointment.
Get him at the negotiating table. Like
and a lot of those things, obviously, because we've only got 17 teams in the competition at the moment, like the odd number of teams can complicate it. When we went to England last year, it was worked out perfectly because it left 16 teams in Australia, trial series, no dramas. So.
I didn't realise he was such an ideas man. I've seen it. He's a genius on the rugby league field, but maybe his talents are wasted. He should be in head office.
Maybe corner office looking across Moore Park.
Just on the way that the fixtures are going to work out, a big decision to knock down rebuild. Like, it seems it's going to take away some of Penrith's advantage. I know going there as a player always
those fabulous away change rooms we've got at Penrith,
and it's part of the identity of we're going to Western Sydney here. It's our backs against the wall. It's the weather's extreme. It's either really hot or a bit. Well, it's not cold, but you know what I mean. For the Aussies, the Sydney siders, it's cold, but big advantage that you're, I guess, choosing to give up.
Yeah. Yes and no. As we've spoken about this before, it's not every day the state government, comes to the club and says we're prepared to, invest $309 million in a community asset. So first and foremost, that's a serious conversation that we have to be a part of, and we're happy with the outcome. We're not, in a perfect world, we'd rather not be moving away for 2 years and playing at CommBank, but we understand that what the government will build in that 2-year period or 18-month period will be a superb community-based asset that we'll be able to come back to in 2027, and it'll have an increased seating capacity on our current seating. It'll have an increased corporate capacity, but as you touched on, when you get down into the bowels of it, like the player facilities, home away, those sorts of things. Like at the moment, they're probably not where we'd like them to be at Penrith, particularly the away rooms.
But I think there's something about it that appeals to me.
It's a little bit like when you used to go to Marathon Stadium and you'd go into the away rooms and someone had already been in there with a hose and wet all the walls and all that sort of stuff. But in the, we're what's the NRL, $700 million business this year. Like it's like we've got to move with the times a little bit, I think so.
Speaking of moving with the times, I guess the NRLW has rose to prominence over the past number of seasons. Penrith don't have a team yet. Are they likely to bid for one of the next licenses? And almost why has it taken this long?
Yeah, so second part of your question first. The next round of licenses we're hoping will come in 27, and we'd be in a position by 27 to be able to put a hand up for that. When the first round of licenses were put out in that 16, that very early 16?
Yes, it was 14.
14. Version of the competition, we just didn't think we were ready for it as an organisation. And if I use the stadium as an example, not that we can play the games there anymore, but we could not play a boys and a girls game back to back. Sorry, when I say boys, men's and women's game back to back in 2024 because of the change room configuration. It's just not set up. When we have played girls' games there as curtain raisers, we've had to hire in Portaloo toilets, and we've had to ask the girls to come dressed and play and leave the venue without having access to adequate showers and those sorts of things. So the venue has held us back a little bit, but just talking to the board over the last couple of months, board have approved the commitment to 3 things. We've got a very talented 17/18-year-old age group of girls out there at the moment. So we've pretty much ring-fenced this group of girls from a contractual point of view because we feel like they could be the nucleus of a NRLW Year 1 team. And the second, 2 other things. We've just about to spend, I think it's circa $250,000 just upgrading a field adjacent to the academy, which will become a dedicated NRLW training field. And the third thing is we've made a commitment, or the board's made a commitment, but for the start of the 20 season, they have a dedicated NRLW training facility as well on the precinct of where the academy sits now.
Yeah, at the back so it's going to have their own dedicated space. Wow.
So when, I said before we started, at the Panthers, if we're going to do something, we'd like to think we're going to do it well.
Yeah.
And we haven't been in a position where we think we've been ready to go down this path. Obviously, they've expanded it from 10 teams to 12 teams for next year, and it looks like it'll be 12 in 25, 26 and 27. The broadcast deal kicks in 28. We're hoping that there might be an influx of money for the 27 season and they expand again.
Yeah.
But we just want to get ourselves into a position. Obviously, we play in the Tasha Gale and the Lisa Fiola. Next year will be our first year. 25 will be our first year participating in the Harvey Norman women's competition. And then whenever we can secure that license for NRLW. So, but we want to be in a position that we don't want to have the license and have half-baked facilities and have that. We'd rather have everything ready to go and then enter it properly. So,
Matt, just on a personal level, your rise to the position as CEO, beginning
CEO Rugby League.
CEO of Rugby League. You began as a school teacher.
Woodwork. Still got them all. So,
like, I guess a story of perseverance wasn't just, I'm done with woodwork. I'm just gonna become a CEO. I've spoke to a number of people around the traps that said, you just sort of almost took a chance and have worked your way up. I don't know if you know Mike Rush at St. Helens.
I do know Mike.
So Mike was my under 11s coach.
Yep.
And then as a academy coach, and then he ends up in the same position as you as the CEO of the football club.
Yeah. I had a similar journey. Like I coached Kristen Inu's age group. So whatever year that was.
Yeah.
And then really became their coach as they got older.
Yeah.
So when they were 21s, I was coaching 21s. When they were Reggies, I was coaching Reggies. And then NRL assistant when they were all playing first grade. So yeah, a similar sort of journey with those boys. But it's managing people. It's creating an environment where people can flourish and managing people. That's, I'm a bit of a reductionist. I like simple things and I try to simplify what we do at Penrith as much as we can. And if like people say, oh, what do you actually do? I say, well, I create an environment where people can flourish and I'm here to help if they need help. So
I think about that as like, I do a few presentations where I talk about leadership. Well, being a leader is a bit like a gardener. You set the environment. You don't actually drag the plants up. You're exposed to the right amount of sunlight. You take out some of the weeds.
Yep.
You know what fertilizer to put in, and they do the rest.
Yeah, and I think too, like I would like to think that the people that I work with, that I empower them to do their job, because like in my role as a CEO, I'm a footy guy. I'm not a commercial guy. Like the majority of the CEOs in the NRL would probably be more commercially orientated than I am. But I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And where I need support, I'll go and get those people and I think they know what I need out of them, and then I'm just going to get out of their way and let them do their job and be there if they need help, or jump in if I can see something that a more mature person might see than a younger person per se. So,
how do you find out what the correct environment is? Because sometimes it's not obvious. Like we spoke earlier about the the correlation between education, things going on outside of football, and performance. So how do you acquire this information? How do you set that environment up? What's it based off?
I think it starts with me. I think any environment, any football club, any team, head coach, like at the end of the day, we all march to the beat of someone's drum. So I think it's got to start with the person that sits in the office at the end of the corridor. Like I would like to think I set a tone. Yeah, I suppose. Or I would like to think that the people that I work with think that I'm like there's an open door policy. Like walk in, knock on the door, walk in. If the door's shut, the door's shut for a reason. But walk in if it's not.
Would in terms of the layout, and would you examine that, like the layout of the environment to make you more accessible?
For sure. Like we're I suppose a lot of businesses are there. We're an open plan office with 4 offices at one end, and it's probably a little bit of a older school thinking, and my office is at the end of the corridor. But the good thing is I get to watch training because it looks out of the training field as well. So it's been designed that way. But yeah, I would like to think that the people I work with every day know that they can walk into my office whenever they want. There's a master key in my office and most people know where it is, and they can walk in and get what they need to go and do something while I'm in a conversation with someone else in my office. Like it's I don't think we take ourselves too seriously out there. Like when you talk about what's the measure, I look at everyone's at work every day. We don't have working from home at Penrith. We work from the office. Yeah. Everyone's in at work. Everyone does good hours. Everyone enjoys themselves. Everyone's got a smile on their face. When we designed the building, we purposely designed it as one level with one kitchen. So on any day of the week, the commercial staff, the football staff, the players are all eating out of one meal space, not an upstairs, downstairs type of scenario. We were very conscious of those sorts of things when we designed the building.
Is there any other little things that you look to implement that have a larger effect? Small little things that maybe one of the things that Ivan worked really hard on
when he came back in 2019 as from the football program, and we, we try and run the commercial side of the operation like a football team. Everyone has a role and a responsibility, and we review. We meet once a week and we talk. But one of the things Ivan will talk about all the time is, I feel like we've created a level of vulnerability-based trust in the building, where people are comfortable enough to go, I need help with this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm very good at that, but I actually need a little bit of help with that. And it's something that we're never going to get it perfect, but I feel like we're working on it all the time. And I feel like I've got a staff, and I'll encompass the football staff into that as well, that I think everyone knows what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I feel like, we've got a group of people that are vulnerable enough to, put their hand up at times and go, hey, I'd love a little bit of support with this if I could get it. So
you transitioned from the classroom to the training ground.
Yep.
Any ambition to go into the corporate world?
Don't think so. No, I'm quite comfortable where I am at the moment. So you never say never. But,
Yeah.
I'm what I do out there, I think has value. I'm, well supported by a fantastic board and a fantastic chairman, head coach, like all the pieces of the puzzle out there. So I do a little bit of speaking at times, a little bit of corporate speaking for different people. But I enjoy rugby league. So
Do you enjoy the ride, the stress, the variables?
Yes and no. I struggle to live in the moment. That's like,
Yeah.
So an hour after full time, like I'm already thinking, everyone's
Yeah.
And I'm already going, what are we going to do on Monday? Well, I do struggle to live in the moment. And I suppose in my role, like there is still an element of everyone here's, there's 500 people in this room having a great time, but I'm still, hey, put that down. I'm still responsible for a large group of people at various times. But I feel like I'm getting better at it. I feel like I'm getting better at trying to enjoy the moment. So
you think, because I often think like there's a lot of transferable knowledge to from sports to the corporate world, and
yes,
and vice versa. So. But I guess for someone in your like you when you're watching the game, are you riding every set of six, every tackle? Like what? So the grand final, for instance, how are you sat watching? Are you just?
It's like no, I still fall into like coach mode.
Yeah,
like we had a corporate box on level 3, and the board are in the box, and I'm in the front row because I don't want anyone walking past and distracting. And I've got my head up against the steel rail, like tackle one.
Yeah.
There's still a little bit of that. Coaching's a disease. You don't you don't get rid of it. So
would you ever go back into coaching?
No.
Why?
That's gone past me. So I coached through to 212, and then went out to Penrith to do this admin job, which was like coaching coordinator is probably the easiest way to describe it. And then JT took the job at West Tigers in 215 and said, do you want to come and I was only back 12 months, and it had gone past me. So, and when I say it'd gone past me, like it was just vastly different. Like I'd spent 15 years at Para.
Yeah.
All those kids had come through. I knew their mums, their dads, their girlfriends, all that sort of stuff. And it was just a really different environment at the Tigers. Like good environment, don't get me wrong, but just different. And and it was, I thought, I'd rather go back and help coaches be better coaches. So.
Is there any advice you can give to people that are maybe thinking about making a career change like you did? Because it must have been a storm of emotions when you decided to give up teaching.
Well, as a teacher, like when you really think about it, like it's almost a job for life in some ways.
Yeah.
I taught at a big Catholic school in Western Sydney, run by the brothers, great level of discipline, great staff. It was fantastic. Football school, so there was a football program that ran there, obviously. And then when you step away from it, like it's, the running joke was, you have your Christmas party and I'll see you on the 1st of February, and you go away for 6 weeks and you just come back to work and it's a new year and you work hard and you achieve results. And, But there's never any mindset of like, did I do a good job? Did I do a bad job? Have I still got a job? Like there's no, the mindset's not like that. And then all of a sudden you jump out and someone goes, there's a 2-year contract. So I'm signing the contract thinking, what am I going to do in 3 years' time? Like it was, I really struggled with the mindset of shifting from like full-time employment basically to end date contract. It really, the whole time I was coaching, I really struggled with that. So, and now going back to what I do now, it's back to the shift of full-time employment, I suppose.
How did you overcome that struggle?
I didn't. No, I didn't. And like when I probably look back at it and like, why did I jump out of the Tigers and back to Penrith? Well, it was the opportunity to go back to full-time employment as opposed to your contract has an end date on it.
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. Before we get into the 4 questions for each and every guest.
Yes.
How strongly do you feel that winning starts in the front office?
Winning starts in the whole office, not just the front office. So, and for me, that's you walk in the door with Julie, who sits on reception with us. That's the first person you're going to see when you walk in. Now, Julie's not. If you say the front office, is Julie is like she's just as important as every other person in there. So I feel like it's that first connection when you come through the door at our place. So I think it's actually everyone. You know, there's probably, take the players out, there'd be 70, 80 employees in our building. And it's every single one of them, down to the bloke that carts the NRL gear around in a gear van, is just as important as everyone else. As far
they
as
all contribute.
So,
yeah, nice.
I've been at an airport where the gear man forgot to bring the jerseys, so I know how important sometimes that job can be. So.
When did that?
I'm not going to.
No. Any chance to put some crap on a gear, Stuart? I think you're a fool to waste it, mate. No.
Actually, sorry, it wasn't an airport. It was the World Club Sevens. It was the Sevens.
All right, okay. Yeah, I bet that went down really well.
Ask Daniel. So.
I will. I'll ask Daniel Anderson about that. 4 questions for each and every guest that we have. The dream spine. I'm pretty sure I know where this
the one
is
we've got
go.
now, and I'm sure people would say, is that with Appy or without Appy? And I love Appy to death, but those 4 boys that are there now are all locally developed juniors.
Yeah,
I think it epitomises what our club's been able to do for the last 5 years.
Yeah, so Dylan, Jerome, Nathan, and Mitch.
And then when Mitch has finished playing hooker, he can go and play in the front row for 10 minutes, like he has at some stage. So.
If football didn't exist, what will you be doing? I guess it's probably still teaching.
This is a lovely piece of timber you've got here, James.
Oh, thank you very much. I
quite often go to somewhere and people go, "What do you think this is?" And I go, "It's been a tree." And they go, "Terry, it's been a tree." I go, "It's been a tree. Now it's a table." So they go, "Oh,
I like that." I want to
use that one.
Yeah. I'm going to steal that one.
Bean a tree.
I think this is bean a tree. Yeah. Smart, isn't it? Yeah.
So
fine, it's bean a tree.
And it comes in little bits, but it's bean a tree. So
you think you would be still
100%.
teaching, or you think you would, or do you think during that time you were looking for something different?
There is not a lot of difference between teaching and coaching, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you've got. Well, Daniel Anderson is a classic example. Trent Robinson.
Rugby league is littered with school teachers.
James Shepherd.
Yep.
I'd spent some time with him. He was an amazing coach for me. I loved him.
And I've never worked in sales, but if I'm selling phones or selling a car, I'm assuming the sales techniques don't alter drastically. It's just the product that differs. You know. So I think there's so many parallels between teaching and coaching. And you made the comment about business. Like when I talk to people, I go, your business and football is no different. You think it is. I have a P&L, you have a P&L. You have staff problems, I have staff problems. The biggest difference is if you get it wrong, no one cares. If I get it wrong, it's on the front page of tomorrow's paper. Like that's because we're such an emotional sport. So
Well, I guess you're educating your players. It's just not algebra or English.
Well, when I referenced that I think we teach well at Penrith, one of the things that we've got 2 friends, one's the head of continuous improvement at the King's School and one's the head of professional development at Knox College. We've actually taken the coaches over to Knox at times, and Matt has worked with the coaches about cutting edge theories in boys' education, questioning techniques. Because, a lot of our coaches fall out of playing into coaching. And don't necessarily have, multiple years of child psychology, that education part of it. So we've, at times we've gone over and Matt's worked with the coaches about.
What was the name of the two roles?
Head of continuous improvement.
Head of continuous improvement.
And the head of professional development.
I like that. Continuous improvement. It's a great mindset to have in any domain of life.
Yep. So, and it was really I think it's been really beneficial for some of our coaches. So
undoubtedly. The most interesting person you've met on your journey so far?
There's a few, but Rod Patterson would be the one. Now, Rod's an ex-school teacher, Palm Beach, Currumbin. I had the pleasure of working with the Australian schoolboys. He coached the Australian schoolboys in 2003, which was Benji Marshall's year, playing for Australia before he played for New Zealand. Carmichael Hunt, Fletty Mateo, that age group. So he's a champion. He's my favourite person in football. So he's semi-retired, does a bit of work with the Titans at the moment. Semi-retired, lives at Pottsville, breeds horses. So
what makes him stand out?
Very knowledgeable about rugby league. And we have this running joke that we can only ever ask each other 3 questions at any one point in time. And I was working in NRL clubs. And
how are you? That's one.
And it was, we'd be in camp with the Australian schoolboys and it was pitch black, and he'd go, so when Brian, it'd be just very NRL questions. And he'd done a lot of work at the QAS when Wayne was coming through. And I'd be asking him questions about Wayne. And but that's the running joke when I bump into him. I go, Rodney, 3 questions.
So it's just hello. It's not how you doing.
Well, it's a bit like Daniel when you ring Daniel. There's no small talk. It's just into the conversation. There's never hi, hello, how are you? No, mate, I was thinking on Friday. You need to just
straight to the point. Not much BS.
Your man, Eamon McManus, I have a soft spot for too. And I only got to know Eamon from when we went and played in the World Club Challenge. When they came here.
They came here,
but caught up with him again last year when we were in England. And
he's a great person.
He's a great guy to have a big with, so.
He is. A sliding doors moment that you think about, maybe the alternative?
Yeah, I was coaching Reggie's at Para, 06 Easter. Peter Sharp was given the whole FC job. Yeah. And so it was round 6 and Smithy rang and said, do you want to do the rest of the year? And I went and saw my boss, the brother that was running the school, and I had 22 weeks long service up my sleeve because I hadn't taken any long service. And said, do you mind if I take term 2 and term 3 off, and I'm going to go and help Brian coach the Parramatta Eels? He said, go for it. So, and then Brian resigned 4 weeks later, and then JT took over that year. So I did that last 16 weeks with JT, and I think we played Melbourne in the first semi, got bundled from coming from 11th or 12th or something. So yeah, and then I've been in footy ever since.
Yeah, if Peter Sharp didn't get the nod,
he hadn't taken that job. Yeah, so he took him to a
grand final.
Year 1.
Yeah. 06, because St Helens played Hull.
Jumped in and took him to the final.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. We beat them up. They beat us in the Challenge Cup semi, and we beat them in the grand final.
He's a good man, Sharpie.
Yeah, he is a good bloke.
World's best.
Wow, isn't it funny how just sometimes life just through the actions and consequences of others present you with these opportunities.
And even if the boss had turned around and said, no, you can't have the leave, I would have rung Brian back and said, sorry, mate.
Yeah, can't do it.
Not even thought twice about it. I'll just keep coaching Reggie's. And they won that year, bastards.
Yeah.
Because the guy that was helping me, Craig Culnane, I said, mate, I'm going full time. You're going to be the Reggie's head coach. And he went, oh, okay. And they went on a rant and won the competition. I thought, bastard. So,
yeah. Life, eh?
Rugby league. It's full of sliding doors, mate. So.
It is. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us here on the Buy Round. I really genuinely have appreciated this conversation. It's been fantastic. I'm sure our viewers and our listeners will feel the same way. And I guess it's funny. I don't know. to wish you luck, because you certainly don't need it with everything that you're doing. It's been fantastic to witness.
We'll take anything we can get.
Yeah,
So.
I think we probably won't realise. I'm of the opinion, I don't think Penrith will get the external credit fully for another 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's not over.
We talk about the fandom part of it. Is statistically 7 years of age. Like when they talk about, what's the ideal age to bolt a young person onto a club, and they talk about 7. So obviously we've now had, a few years. I'd be interested 15 years from now. Like, what does the demographic of a Panthers home game look like?
Yeah.
Is it this huge cohort of young kids that have just jumped on to what we've been doing because of the Bryant, not so much the winning, but the Bryans and the Titos and the Jeromes, and that they've become lifelong Panthers fans. So I'm interested to see it. I'm
over in the Sutherland Shire, and there's a lot of Panthers jerseys getting around there, and I'm like, no, you're supposed to support Cronulla.
Friends of mine they watched the game from the Stain Hotel in Manly, and they said the whole pub was for Penrith. So.
Yeah, we've certainly made an impact. But again, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Sorry.